Welcome, everyone. Today's going to be like last time. We're mostly, the three of us are on FarPlay in order to make sure that we get the highest quality audio and that we can crossover talk. If you don't know what I'm talking about, that's when you're on Zoom and you have to cut in to get heard, or you're on your iPhone and you have to cut in to get heard. And particularly as a vocalist, I don't like yelling to cut in to get heard. Maybe if I'd been a theater singer, maybe I would, but I grew up on microphones, so I like the fact that we can hear each other talking at the same time. So not to be rude to each other, but just so that we don't have this abrupt echo cancellation. Now, as far as Q&A goes, after Amani's ready for that, then you can come on to FarPlay, and David Liao is such a great guy. He's here to help us with that. But I'd like you all to meet Amani Roberts, but first of all, let me say this. This is Brad Chapman's Radical Vocal Coach podcast. I'm a vocal coach who believes that recording is incredibly important, how good you are at it, how comfortable you are with it. And I have these very educated, very well experienced people here to back me up, to let you know that what's the real world? I've mentioned this before. We tell the truth here. So we don't play the Hollywood games and try to drag you down the wrong path just so that you'll spend money on us. We want you to know the best way to do this, and which is the fun way to do it. And Amani is going to particularly talk about the financial part of being an artist, which I think is terrific. Because if we think we're going to have fun and then we go down the wrong path, which Monty and I have already talked about, then that could take all the fun out of it, right? And that could like ruin the whole career. So that's important. And also, I have released my video program, not for vocal technique. I want to be very clear about this. It's how to learn the phrasing of your favorite artists. And I don't have anything official to show you right now, but that's available. And I call it the Vocal Muse Suite. It is on my webpage if you want to go there to find it. And why did I use the word muse? I think it was really cool because AI told me to use it. And muse is the meaning of someone who helps you with your career. So with the video program that I've made, whatever artist you choose to learn from, which this program will show you how to do, is your muse. So today maybe it's Mariah Carey, maybe tomorrow it's Tom Petty, maybe tomorrow it's Ariana Grande. You know, you can learn from all these people and figure out what's going on out there besides vocal technique, because vocal technique is only the basic premise. Vocal technique has no value. It's very important. Vocal technique has no value unless it helps you sing songs better. And many of us have had, as singers in the past, have had the experience where we thought after we went to a voice teacher, everybody would like us better. And then we had people commenting, well, you know, Brad, I used to like it better because there's no feel anymore. I know you've got more chops. That's what one guy said. I can tell you could do things you couldn't do before. He says, but I don't feel you anymore, man. It's not that good. So that's what that program is about. All right, Amani, hey, how you doing this afternoon?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much for having me join your show, Brad.
Well, it's an honor to have you. And I don't say that with what would you call it, with smoke. I really mean it. It's so good to have you here to help us with things that we don't understand. I must want to bring up your bio real quick here. I had it. Of course, I had it. Now it's gone. Here it is. Okay, there we go. All right. So I'm looking at Amani's bio, and so you're an international keynote speaker. So that's pretty cool that we have that on our show. So explain that, would you? And global performer. That's all one sentence there.
Yeah. Oh, well, so I speak to audiences worldwide about It's a couple topics. Usually I talk about unlocking your creativity through the use of music and nostalgia. Also talk about why more people need to write books. That's another one of my topics.
Oh.
And then I also speak about the music business in general. And then the performer part is that I'm a DJ who's DJed at places all over the world, most notably the World Cup in Brazil in 2014, and then many other domestic places in the U.S. and in Canada, and also Mexico too.
This is really interesting. A DJ talking about how, and we'll talk about this in a moment, the book that we're talking about today that Amani is writing and will be out in February. Is that correct, Amani?
That's correct, yes.
Is about what happened to R&B. And I was a live performer at the time. And we were doing R&B because that's what was popular at the time, and that's what the people wanted to dance to. And they called it disco. We knew it was R&B. That was, I don't know. They came up with that because these guys were playing records, and that was kind of the beginning of what you're doing now. You're getting up and you're playing different mixes of different recordings to entertain an audience. Is that correct?
Yeah, mixing live, mixing acapellas, regular songs, crossing over genres, exactly.
Well, I saw you coming. And I said to the musicians whenever they were irresponsible, like not showing up on time for the gig and then having the nightclub owner come down on me, I would say, you know what, probably you're going to lose your jobs to a DJ. Why? Well, they'd look at me, oh, that's crazy. You know, people want to see us up on stage. Well, so, yeah, they do, but got to look at it from the club owner's perspective. If they've got one guy they have to deal with who always shows up on time and they pay 1/5 less per week, what do you think that guy's going to do? Yeah. And so, you know, almost everybody's now is using DJs because it is, well, it's always high quality music.
Correct.
I'm not going to argue that because sometimes my band did not always give high quality music. But how do you think this is something you've researched, obviously. So how do you see how DJs, if you will, replaced R&B? Maybe you haven't looked at it that way.
Well, I wouldn't say that DJs replace R&B. We're more the vehicles to share the different genres that are being played. And so whether it be R&B, Afro beats, pop, Moombahton, you know, Latin music, we're more the vehicles. We just play what is pretty much the audience wants to hear to keep them on the dance floor. And if it's all R&B one set and it's all pop music the next set, we're kind of the vehicle to help the dance floor stay as packed as possible.
Well, yeah, which is what we used to do as a band. So are you pretty animated?
When you say animated, I mean, I'm not going to get all crazy on the microphone. I'm going to let the music do the talking for me for the most part. And, you know, if I need to get on the microphone, of course, you can do that. But I prefer to let my animation show through how stringing in one song to the next song to the next song, and that will get the crowd hyped.
Right. And so what, do you have a stage presence, would you say?
Of course. Yes. You know, in my own unique, authentic style, but yes.
Yeah. I mean, why not? I watch a lot of tennis, and there was a DJ doing the tennis thing, and so they put the camera on him, and he's like, yeah, and he's, you know, doing the fist pumps and the whole thing, and I mean, it's what I used to do as a lead singer.
Yeah,
so I get it.
I'm a little smoother than the fist pump thing. I mean, I can do that, but I prefer to be a little smoother than that.
Smoother? How is that? How does that translate?
I mean, I'd let the music do the talking. I'm not going to get all crazy with fist pumps, but, you know, I know the proper time to cut the volume so the audience sings along, and that's what you want.
Oh, you want to sing along with the records, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
So do you sing along as well on your mic? Or?
Oh, well, not on the microphone. I will be singing along, but I won't be on the microphone, so yes.
Okay, so, all right, cool. Let's go back to your bio here. Okay, so DJs Mean Business. That was the first book.
Yes.
What is that about?
That's a book that takes you through the time slots of a traditional DJ set in Hollywood, 10 p.m. to 2 a.m., and relates it to growing a business. Every 15 minutes, there's a little bit of a shift. For example, let's say 10 p.m. to 10:15 p.m., you're just getting warmed up. You're trying to see who's in the club, who do you want to keep there. You want to try to start to build the dance floor slowly but surely. That's the first one. Then I picked like 11 p.m. Something always goes wrong during a DJ set, whether or not you're playing with turntables and you get dusty needles, computer crashes, sound goes out. But the rule is that the music can never stop. So what do you need to do so that the music never stops? And when you relate that to someone's career or business, sometimes you could run into some obstacles, but you can't close down the business. So what do you do to keep the business going? Do you need to take a shift and maybe start to offer a different, maybe primary product or something like that? Or if it's your career, do you maybe shift and pursue a different avenue of the business that you're in? So then we get to midnight, which is usually prime time. Just keep the dance floor packed, hit after hit, get the crowd singing along, and just really, really, that's when it's like go time. And then from there, you're also thinking of business-wise, you just want to grow revenue, week over week, month over month, year over year. You just really want to kind of take advantage of the growth. And then we get to time period where I think it was like 1:30, maybe 1:30. I'm a lover of slow jams, as you'll learn, ballads. Okay. So I love to help people who've come to the club finish what they came to do. So I might put on a slow jam to let them kind of, finish and do that. But also, the slow jam will bring up nostalgia. But in business, you'll see many successful businesses use nostalgia to recreate themselves, reinvent themselves. Mm-hmm. Some of my favorite examples are like Nintendo. Nintendo will always bring back the old school games that were very, very like classic, like Super Mario Brothers. Adidas with the Stan Smith shoes that were out in the late 70s that are still very popular now. That's how they're using nostalgia. And then another example I love is Old Spice. Old Spice will bring up kind of old characters and old videos, but they still remain very relevant and one of the leaders in their category. And then afterwards, the club is over, 2 p.m., we go home, and then that's the time for feedback. For me, I used to drive for Uber, so I would go outside the club, get in my car, turn on my little Uber meter, and pick up someone, most of the time that was in the club I was at. They'd get in the car, and I'd be like, oh, you were at the such-and-such club tonight. What'd you think of the DJ? Listen. And then finally, when they were about to drop them off, I said, by the way, I was the DJ that was there tonight. And then usually we kind of geek out about that. But companies always do feedback, too. Once, an event is finished, someone has purchased a product, they always send surveys out, so it's just follows a similar concept. So that's a quick overview of the book. There's stories in there, there's lessons, there's learnings, but that's the summary of the book.
Well, this is very interesting to me. I don't know how many singers who will listen to this podcast have actually done a gig like that. Mm. And I remember the same strategies. We would start, people come in the club, they're not really ready to rock and roll yet. They're just kind of hanging. And so we would play some soft stuff, and then we would try to build things up and get people going. And how do you get the first couple out on the dance floor?
What you might do is you might play like a classic hit. You have like a long database of hits that are just known to work. So you might kind of pick a classic hit to get people on the dance floor. Then you might want to sandwich it between a song that's maybe just recently fading from popularity, but then you want to put that song first, then a classic song, then maybe you want to bring in a song that's just now on its ascension to getting popular. So you kind of sandwich them together, and then you start to string them together 2 and 3 at a time.
Well, everyone, I didn't know this was going to happen, but this is just right on. In fact, I paid a guy $16 an hour back in the early 70s to teach me how to do what you're just talking about. Mm. And sometimes, the club was so down, I would actually go out and ask a girl to get up on the dance floor and dance with me. Mm. Get things going. I'm sure, I imagine you've noticed that once one couple comes up, that's like the icebreaker.
Yes. Usually in the club atmosphere, you want to get the ladies to dance. So if you get the ladies on the dance floor, the dudes will follow. That's the rule. So, you could play some old stuff. Like Michael Jackson works well. Okay. Bruno Mars nowadays will work well, depending on what song. And you just kind of sneak it in, and then depending on the audience and the genre or the demographic background, you might, maybe sneak in like I don't know about a Taylor Swift song because hers aren't really dancey, but Miley Cyrus could work. Or on the other side, you could put in like something maybe a little more hip hop based, like Biggie, things like that, and you grow from there.
Okay, so as I've always been very upfront, this is singer this podcast is what you might call singer heavy. In other words, it's mostly about singers. But what you're saying right here is what singers need to know if they're handling an audience at all. And there actually was a discussion with Corey Jacobs. Someone asked him, what should I do to be a good singer? And he said, well, you need to get up on that stage and you got to move around. You got to play the audience. Those are the things you got to know. And here it is in a book.
Yes, reading the crowd. That's one of the skills that no two crowds are ever the same because people are, it's just impossible. So how to read a crowd, take them on a journey. It takes a lot of practice and experience.
And you're not always the same.
Yes, exactly.
I remember that. Some nights you're just really up, and some nights I wasn't.
Exactly. So, but it's not really about you; it's about the audience. So you got to put that to the side as best you can.
Right. Well, exactly. So you have to, you come into a job.
Yeah.
If your job is smiling, then you got to smile. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So he's worked globally. All right. So with brands now, I've done Amani and I just met recently, so. I did some research on Instagram, and you're just like, I see pictures of you doing all kinds of stuff, with all kinds of different people, and I'm going, okay, this guy is hyperactive, man. He's really working the crowd everywhere. So it says when you work with global brands like Marriott and 7-Eleven, what are you doing for them?
So Marriott, that was DJing like one of their award ceremonies in corporate. 7-Eleven, I have a DJ team building activity where we brought in a group of 120 people and we taught them some quick DJ lessons, had them perform on stage, get behind the microphone, and also added in a creative element where they had to create a record label name and a t-shirt that would exemplify the theme of the record label name. That was a team building activity. So those were two of the most common examples. I also had a residency at a Marriott, because I used to work for Marriott, had a residency at a Marriott where I would DJ there every Wednesday during the summer. So those are just some different ways, whether it be a corporate event, residency, and then a team building with 7-Eleven.
So it says Chartmetric generating over $1 million in revenue. What does that mean?
So we'll probably talk about that too, but Chartmetric, which is one of the leading kind of data analytics platforms for the music industry. And I actually wrote an article for Chartmetric on why the emergence of Afrobeats was accelerated by the partnership with Western artists. So if you remember Calm Down with Rima, it went to a certain level of the charts, but only when they partnered and had Selena Gomez get on the remix did it hit number one. And then you'll have, Justin Bieber, I'm trying to remember the name of the song he was on, but Justin Bieber was on a Afrobeats remix, and that one also went to number one after kind of reaching a plateau of 7 or 8. So we talked about that. I made some predictions as to who could partner, what artist. So that's when I work with Chartmetric, and then Chartmetric works with me at Cal State University Fullerton, coming in to guest speak to the students.
So this will answer a question for me, and maybe hopefully people in the audience have maybe wondered themselves, why all of a sudden are there 3 or 4 artists on one record? And my assumption was, because I'm not a music businessman like you. I don't follow things like you do, but I thought, well, maybe, because I do know that the music industry is having trouble making ends meet. So maybe if you put 4 artists on one record, you've cut your overhead and maximized your profits. Is that happening, or am I totally off base?
I don't know about cutting over. I think when you put 4 artists on a song, you're going to take 4 different audiences, bring them together, so you're going to maximize the exposure for that particular single and artist, and then you're going to expose them to different audiences that will then follow them. So you're going to kind of collaborate, grow your audience, hopefully get a hit that will go higher because you have the 4 different audiences buying and streaming the song. So it kind of makes sense. That's why you have so many people kind of hop on tracks together nowadays.
Yeah, I thought of that, especially with the global economy. But you pay for one recording. So, in theory, the recording costs $75,000, but you have 4 artists.
Yeah.
Where the other way, you have $75,000 4 times.
Right. Well,
but maybe marketing-wise, you're right. Maybe it doesn't save any money at all. Maybe it costs more.
It could save each individual artist some money for the production costs, but the hope is that with the increased audience, potential audience, that song will get streamed more, sold more, and jump to the top of the charts, which would then lead to even better opportunities in the future, either through sponsorship, additional collaborations, appearances, everything else.
Well, singers, I hope you're listening because this is all very, very good information. So you've helped us. You've been featured in Forbes. That's pretty cool. People Magazine and Yahoo. So the Forbes obviously more business. People Magazine. What was the deal with that?
For People Magazine, I DJ'd a wedding between Zach Ertz, I forget his wife's name, but Zach Ertz was the tight end for the Eagles at the time, and his wife was, I have to look it up, was a star player for the U.S., what was her name? She was so nice. U.S. women's national soccer team. And so, we'll see here. They just had a baby too. Hold on. Julie Ertz.
All right. 10 bands. 10 bands? For a bag?
Who I DJ'd their wedding.
Red bag?
Come on,
10 bands?
Where can you get this? You can't get this nowhere.
He gonna hook me up.
Listen, I'm gonna do like.
I got 10 bands, right? You got 8?
Yeah, I'll do 8 for you.
That's
Cash 8
lovely.
is good.
Got my name, boom.
Hell yeah.
Got you.
I fuck with you, bro. That's why I watch your videos, man. I'm telling
yeah,
you.
You do?
exactly.
Oh, you already know what it is then. You already know what it is then. Oh, you already know what it is
Anybody
then,
who
boom
knows
game.
anything about business knows that these credentials are extremely important. You want to have people listening to you having those street creds, as they call them,
Yes.
are extremely important. Okay, so I would recommend the book, most definitely. So it's interesting. So you take business people and then use music theory in a way, or performance theory, to help them with their businesses. Is that correct? Am I reading that correctly?
When I have my unlocking creativity sessions, I like to use lessons from some of the most popular music groups of all time. For example, you'll have like a framework, and one of them is creative risks. Take creative risks. One of my favorite stories is that back in the day, Earth, Wind, and Fire partnered with a magician. And at their live shows, they would have somewhat of a magic show. They had this really floating pyramid that they used, and they partnered with a magician. Now, the magician's assistant was an up-and-coming magician that you would probably know now, David Copperfield. So David Copperfield was working on that. And they got to work so much during the late 70s, all through the 80s and 90s, that when it was time for Earth, Wind, and Fire to get their Kennedy Center honors, David Copperfield was the one who introduced them. So that's one of my stories. Another part of the framework, and that just talks about taking creative risks and how it worked out. Another part of the framework is, it's important for people to collaborate with others if you really want to hit that next level. Kool and the Gang is a great example because for a certain time period, I think their biggest hit was Jungle Boogie. And that hit number 4 in the charts. But they couldn't get a hit that would get them their number 1 song. So what they did is that they hired a lead singer, or partnered with a lead singer, J.T. Taylor, also a Brazilian producer, Yumir Deodata from Brazil. And with that combination and collaboration, they had their first number 1 hit, Celebration, popular song, one of the most legendary songs of all time. But then, having like really number 1 or number 2 songs, and that's just from collaborating with others. So it's important in business. A lot of times, the saying is that if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Well, we want to go far in business, so you need to collaborate with other people. And so I just have different lessons using different music groups to really kind of show and enhance the point. Then I also give homework and assignments. One of my favorite examples is actually The Whispers. So the music group The Whispers, they first released a single in 1964. They did not get a top 10 Hot 100 hit, and this is the charts that has all genres, country, pop, hip-hop, R&B. They didn't get a top 10 100 hit until 1987. And so this lesson is resilience, and how the things you have to do is just stick with resilience, do that. And because you have the resilience lessons, but then they have the collaboration lesson, because they only got that hit because they collaborated with L.A. Reid and Babyface on Rocksteady, and that got them to number 7. So I have all sorts of different examples through the different frameworks, and it really helps to maybe make the lessons a little bit less intimidating, because most of these groups people know. And then a side note to The Whispers is that they continued to ascend because Will Smith sampled their song And the Beat Goes On when he had his big hit Miami too.
So interesting. So business people, I mean, obviously they are very positive about this, but in my mind, I'm going, really, business people wanting to learn from Kool and the Gang? but you're making that happen.
Yes.
And they're obviously getting the point.
Right.
Which, again, is very cool. I mean, I my dad was a businessman, and he ran a successful business for 30 years.
Yeah.
And so some of my theories, the way I do things, is things I learned from him, such as goal setting, which I'm sure you teach.
Yeah.
But to use music to teach goal setting, very, very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's look at what you're talking about with the new book. Okay, so you're talking about R&B dominated the charts, and I think not everybody knows that, obviously, because of their age group. But, and I get to drop a name. Earth, Wind & Fire came to our studio in Hollywood when I was teaching there. Really nice guys. And was it Phil? Yeah, Philip Bailey. Yeah. Very interesting way that he chose to sing. And, I was listening to, they had that hook in that one song with the horns. Ba-doop, ba-doop, ba-doop. You recognize that?
I believe so, yeah.
Ba-doop. Anyway, it was really interesting. If you listen very carefully, Philip is singing extremely high note with the horns. And he's actually doing that. Ba-doop, ba. But it's mixed so that all it does for most people is add this kind of a color to the horns.
Yeah.
But nobody knows it's happening. Most people would never care. But it created something unique, like you were talking about, a collaboration in a way.
Right.
Hey, let's add vocals to the horn section,
I think one of my favorite Earth, Wind & Fire is Reasons. That's about it, but that's when they could put some true singing on display right there.
Yeah. Philip could really pop out those high notes. Quite a counter. They're called countertenors in the vocal world.
Okay.
And they're tenors. Everybody's pretty familiar with that. But countertenor is the guy whose voice is a little bit higher than that. Sometimes, you remember Air Supply?
Yes.
If you ever saw them, the lead singer that sang all the high notes was about half the height of the lead singer who sang the other parts, right? So there is a physical phenomenon. It's not 100%, but if you have a smaller body, quite often you have a higher voice, because smaller vibrating masses make higher pitches with less effort.
Okay.
And so you could hear this guy, singing. Basically, women were going, "How could he sing that high? I can't sing that high." Right? So that's another subject we won't get into. But okay, so Temptations, Earth, Wind & Fire, Jackson 5. Jackson 5 R&B. Okay, so they were would you call them more on the pop side of R&B, or what? How would you categorize them?
I think at their roots, they're an R&B group. Of course, they had some pop. They had success in the pop charts, but at their roots, they were an R&B group for sure.
So their dad was more on that side.
Oh yeah.
Did he have a back? I only know a little bit about him, but I imagine you studied him. So did he have that in his background? That was a musician. He was a musician, right?
I'm not sure. I don't know much about Joe Jackson in terms of his musical background, but I'm sure he was coming from R&B kind of origins. I'm pretty sure.
Well, Michael Jackson certainly went R&B in his own way.
Yeah, well, the king of pop and R&B, yeah. But listen to what's it, Rock With You, his first album.
Yeah.
And then he kind of started to, but it's all like Billie Jean, Beat It, but he's a unicorn. He's very different. He crossed over many genres successfully.
Yeah, he came to our studio too.
Nice.
Yeah,
nice.
Really. It's really unfortunate what happened to him. I've had some discussion with producers as to why maybe some artists do die young, and I don't know about. I'm not going to say that's about Michael. I wouldn't know, but some of the producers said, well, they really can't perform without drugs, and so that kind of becomes a problem for the artist. Okay, so history of R&B groups. So you start decades starting in the 50s.
Yes.
Okay, so I don't the group. Oh, so bring in. Oh, the Isley Brothers. Okay.
Yes.
The bass guy with his that was an interesting group because there was a bass and then the other guy was a countertenor.
Well, and so the Isley Brothers, they're actually.
I've got the wrong group in mind. Never mind.
Oh. Okay.
Or is it? Wasn't it the two white guys, right? Or is this the Isley Brothers that was African American group?
Yes, African American group,
okay.
Isley Brothers, and they're one of the rare groups who has had a hit in every decade, from the 50s through the mid 2000s. So if the hit they first had was like kind of a rock song like Shout. You know, the shout that got to be really popular through Animal House, but that was their biggest hit in '59. Then they kept having hits all through the '60s, '70s, '80s, and even in the mid-2000s when they had Contagious, when they were with R. Kelly and Shantae Moore. So that's never happened. 6 decades having Billboard Hot 100 hits. So that's why they're very unique. And that's why I love them so much, because while they're still creating hits, if you look at some of the biggest hip-hop hits, particular Biggie Smalls, when he uses Between the Sheets as a big sample, also uses, and then Ice Cube used Footsteps in the Dark for It Was a Good Day. Like, if you look at some of the most classic hip-hop songs, they sampled the Isley Brothers, too.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is cool stuff. No, I mean, really, it is. I'm like, whoa.
Yeah.
And it just, it's going to affect my life most definitely, and I'm going to take a look at both these books. What was I going to say about this that I thought was pretty... Okay, so singers, all right. So let's look at a little bit about what happens before this happens. So these groups have got to create content. You said it's a fair thing to say.
Yes.
Yeah, so the writer, the singer, the musicians or whatever, they have to create content. Now, I may be using a business word that maybe some people are not real familiar with, but would you explain that from your perspective? So what's the content that they have to provide?
Well, nowadays, if we go back in the day, basically they would come into the studio, they'd sing a song, and they'd leave. Most of the time, the older groups, they really weren't writing the songs. The songs were already written for them, and they would just sing them and then leave. And part of that, the issue becomes they didn't understand that if they were able to be the songwriter and have the publishing, that would give them substantial money for years to come. But that was kind of like a secret that wasn't really shared with them back in the day. Then as you get to some other artists, you get to like the 70s and they start to understand and learn about like the game. Then they come in and they write the music and they keep their publishing, or at least try to negotiate a portion of the publishing and go on. Nowadays, the content, they got to write the song, record the song, do a behind the scenes video, do a lyric video, do a video. Then they have to talk to fans over social media, do a blog post. I mean, they have so much more to do in terms of content. So it's shifted, but it's still, in my opinion, the foundation is still writing your songs, keeping your songwriting and publishing credit, and then doing the other things to help promote.
You and I talked a little bit offline about groups being maybe possibly more creative than a songwriting team or an individual writer. What were your thoughts about that?
Well, groups, I would say groups, not only do they have to write the song, sing the song, perform the song, but then they have to plan out different routines for when they are touring and doing the live performances. And they have to, memorize all the dance steps and everything. Nowadays, there's not that many groups, so that's kind of gone away. But still, so that takes an extra skill, but then they still have to make sure that they are continuing to write and do things like that. So that's kind of my thoughts on that particular subject.
Well, you mentioned three different singers creating a harmony and just being such a sensation over some of the digital stuff we're hearing now, where the computer actually harmonizes vocals.
Well, there's nothing like seeing a group sing live, because you have different, instead of having to use, different things in the studio like auto-tune, like live, you're going to have someone singing the top, middle, and the low, and be able to take that song and sing it as long or as short as they want to and just continue to sing. And doing it live is very rare nowadays. There's nothing like hearing a group, like a Boyz II Men singing a song a cappella together. That's just very rare, very special. So when okay, you're talking about three different people now. Their brains are involved in creating this harmony, usually in a group situation. You might have the keyboard player write it for them, but let's image the three of them trying to decide how it's going to sound. So what I'm kind of talking about is three creative minds now, right?
Instead of one.
Yes, that's true, because they all have to be creative and what they're singing, the intonation and how they're singing, and then making sure it sounds good together quickly.
And you think that's very important?
Absolutely, yes.
So I saw a little bit on Instagram. You're with a lot of different age groups, talking to them and bringing these groups into their view. They've never heard of them.
Yes.
I've been teaching voice now for about 45 years. I've been in business for 55. And one of the things that I thought was going to happen as a voice teacher is I figured when the next generation came around, I was going to be the old guy. I was going to be the guy that was didn't know anything about the new groups. But it was interesting that I had these young kids coming in wanting to learn Beatles songs. They wanted to learn Led Zeppelin. Yeah. They wanted to learn from groups that were 30 years before they were born. And I wonder if this would be true for you in your mind, is that these kids like these groups because they brought more creativity.
I think that could be a case. I also think that groups nowadays are a little bit of a novelty. Like they don't really have any newer groups to follow their ascension, so they're kind of going back to the classic groups, whether it be Led Zeppelin, Metallica, New Edition, Destiny's Child. Destiny's Child is not Beyonce in them. And so, just kind of following these groups around and just seeing the different elements and how then, you mentioned the Beatles, then they all go solo, and do they come back and sing together and things like that.
It's really quite an industry, isn't it?
It is. Yes, very complex, very interesting.
Let's see. Let me just look at this. Okay, sorry, emergency. So let's discuss, like you say, in the perfect storm involving the full. Let me read this exactly. This book will discuss how an imperfect storm involving the full emergence of hip hop and untimely music recession. So explain that, please.
Well, this is when the book kind of shows you the reasons for the decline in R&B groups. Because once you get to about middle of 2000s, once Destiny's Child all went solo, then R&B groups fell off the charts. Like they went from dominating the Hot 100 charts to barely making any appearances. And based on research I did for 4 years, I came up with kind of 6 different reasons. Probably the top reason, which is somewhat controversial in the music scene, is like the emergence of hip hop. So hip hop kind of really, really got to be big and took over the Hot 100 charts. But the question that's kind of underneath it all is, well, why couldn't record producers and record labels promote both R&B groups and hip hop groups? Mm-hmm. Primarily, the reason that's talked about is that it's cheaper for a hip hop group. It's one person, singular. They have a track. They're rapping. They don't need choreography. They don't need, they just need to rap and do that. They don't need to do much production work, generally speaking.
They buy beats to start off with, sometimes
pretty much, and they may accentuate it, and it's pretty much singular. They don't have to spend as much money on choreography, makeup, etc. All the expenses. Also, when you look at like 2004, 5, 6, 7, the world was going into a recession. Mm-hmm. The music recession was kind of a little bit of a lagging indicator because the music recession was about 2008 to 2013, mm-hmm. and so that really affected it. And then labels were spending significantly less money on artists in general, and they were choosing to kind of promote and go with the singular artists. Groups are expensive. You have 5 people, 4 people. You have to pay for everything, like I mentioned, makeup, production, live. You might even need a band or whatever with them and things like that.
Hotel rooms.
Well, yeah, we're not even getting to touring.
Yeah, right.
Then,
touring, yeah, right.
Another kind of reason that is talked about but not very frequently is that for R&B groups specifically, with their earned PR, so this is how they market themselves, but earned PR, they would get featured in a lot of magazines.
Do you want to explain that, earned PR? Make sure we all understand.
Earned PR is like earned public relations through like you're not paying for it. So you have earned PR, you have paid media, and then you have owned. Owned is like for sure your own website. That's like your own PR. It's a little bit gray. Social media is kind of owned, but then it's kind of not, because we have like the story of MySpace and them going away, but you still kind of own your social media platforms. Earned is like if a magazine writes an article about you and they're not paid to write that article. It's not like an editorial. So in the R&B group's instance, there was like 4 main magazines that would continue to promote and spread the word about R&B groups. It was Ebony Magazine, it was Essence Magazine, and it was Jet Magazine, which were primarily African-American magazines. And then you also had Vibe Magazine. So at its peak, and I have to check the numbers, but at its peak, you had probably about 8 million monthly subscribers combined for those magazines. Once we went through recession, the monthly subscribers dropped to below 1 million, maybe like 500 to 750 monthly subscribers. Magazines kind of have gone away. They're not as popular anymore. They have digital versions, but it's not the same.
Yeah.
But particularly for R&B groups, it really hurt them because this was earned PR. They'd be on covers of magazines, weekly, monthly. It was a great cycle, and it went away. So that was a fact that's not really talked about a lot. Then, in 1996, the U.S. government, they passed the Telecommunications Act of 1996. That was supposed to diversify radio and allow all these smaller radio stations to maybe play different genres and do things, but it had the exact opposite impact. We had all these big companies like a Clear Channel and other big companies that would buy up these radio stations, and then they went to like a playlisting format. They went to like a playlisting format where if I'm in Miami, if I'm in D.C., if I'm in Chicago, I'm in San Francisco, the main radio stations would play the same set of songs. There was very little opportunity for groups, specifically R&B groups, to enter into the charts. So, for example, back in the day, if you went to Atlanta, you would hear a lot of TLC because they're from Atlanta. Mm-hmm. If you went to Philadelphia, you would hear a lot of Boyz II Men because they're from Philly. Houston, it would be like Destiny's Child. You hear a lot of Destiny's Child. I discovered Shy from Howard University, went to Howard University. That's a DC-based group. Mm-hmm. And so the fact that they then went to playlisting formats for all of these cities and these radio stations, it really hurt. And then when you look at the board of directors for these radio companies, they were not very diverse. So they didn't really understand or care to, really push to have diverse and R&B groups in part of the playlist. So that's another reason. And then you also have EDM. EDM music hit the mainstream, was really, really big back then. And the parallels that you'll start to see artists like Rihanna, Usher, and Neo started to sing like EDM tracks. They're like R&B artists primarily. They were starting to sing EDM tracks back then. And so those are kind of like the 5 or 6 reasons that really kind of accelerated the decline and the disappearance of R&B groups, which I talk about. I have statistics. I have all these facts and studies that is in the book, and that's kind of in the last third of the book. So that's kind of all that.
So you may not want to answer this question, but you have it right here. He says, okay, what does the future hold for R&B groups? You may want to make us read the book. Mm-hmm. So you decide how much you want to say about that.
Well, so here's what, generally speaking, I personally, my opinion is that, R&B groups will never return to the heyday, which was the 90s, when they dominated the charts between, the Jodeci's, the SWVs, the TLCs, the Boyz II Men. However, the only caveat is you do see K-pop groups, and they're very successful, and they're doing well, and they're navigating the technological environment, and they're touring, and they're making money. So there is a way to do it. It's just whether or not we can get, R&B groups to follow the same path. Because when you look at a K-pop group, and let's say you look at a BTS video. So if you put a BTS video next to a New Edition video from back in the 80s, it is identical. Wow. If you put a Blackpink video next to a TLC video or listen to their songs, they are pretty much copying what led to the success of these groups from the 80s and 90s. So the formula still works. It's just whether or not who's going to make it work for the long game. And I will say, like, Silk Sonic is a very small but good example that, there's still an audience. And Silk Sonic's a 2-person, Anderson .Paak and Bruno Mars. It worked. They got Grammys and they did a lot of sales. But then when you look at groups like TLC, who maybe their first album came out like 90, 91, and they went all the way to like 10 or 11 years through like 4 or 5 or 6 albums. That's what you want to see. You want to see a group like that release like 4 or 5 or 6 albums and dominate the charts. And then you say, okay. And then you want others, because at the same time that TLC was doing that, you had Boyz II Men, you had SWV, you had Jodeci, then you had like Jagged Edge, you had Drew Hill. Like all these groups were releasing album after album and doing well. We didn't realize at the time how fortunate and how much they were dominating charts until now you look back, you're like, wow, what happened?
Cool. Sorry. It's just like, wow. You're taking me into dimensions that I'm under the surface I know about, but I don't really understand them. And your memory of all these things is extremely good as well.
Well, I've done a lot of research, so yeah.
Yeah, well, I know when you live something, it's easier to remember. So let's go back to content, because there's producers here and there's singers here, and then David he's just such a cool guy. He sits over there and makes absolutely sure that everything was working right and is quiet, but hopefully he'll ask some questions. I want him to because he has a classical background. I want that perspective as well. Okay, so songwriter, like you mentioned, first thing, right? So got to have content in the songwriter. Then performance abilities, and that's where I come in, is to help the singers emote emotions, so that there's some content there, a storyline, if you will. And then you have the producer, the record producer. Now he's got to provide a content that your theories can use, or maybe they're ones actually using your theories. I mean, I'm not saying the theories you're talking about are hardcore. I mean, they actually prove themselves. So maybe I shouldn't call them theories. But how do you see that change? Have you looked that far back into like how a record actually starts, and then how it goes and then ends up into the marketing world? And I know we talked a little bit about countries making it into the charts too. Does that all? Can you make sense out of what I just said, please?
Well, sure. I think when you look at a producer, like, that's like the conductor on the train. Like, the producer, like, they're going to be able to steer the train in the right direction, make some adjustments on the fly, talk to the artist to let them know, yes, I understand that you want to sing this, but this might make it sound better. These lyrics might make it sound better. And then, they're taking the song that's written and making it a hit. So they're like the conductor. They're very crucial. You can't really, without a producer, you can't have a hit. And it's all about the song. And so I think they're like the conductor. You can't have one without them.
There's a lot of people who are self-producing now.
I think self-producing, in my opinion, is like a little dangerous because you're kind of working in a tunnel. And you need some outside perspective. Like, you know what? Maybe you want to, maybe lighten up the snare here. Maybe you want to kind of cut the music out at this point. Or maybe you want to start with a little bit more emotion. Maybe you want to end with a little bit more emotion. And self-producing is good, but you always need like some feedback. Feedback is the gift. So if you can get a producer to give you some feedback and you work well together, plus then a producer can get you collaborations with other artists and kind of match you stuff. But if you're always working in like a little funnel or a silo, that can be a little dangerous, in my opinion.
No, I agree with you. I think there's a lot of facts that will back that up.
Yes.
And I've seen it. And one of the things that I've seen, and I used to do a lot of self-recording. And I always noticed that, to me, listening back, I could listen to for things like pitch and rhythm. Maybe, I was working with vowel shapes at one point, when I was rebuilding my voice. But it always sounded great to me. I never felt entertained by my own voice. And I've noticed a lot of great singers and actors will say the same thing. They don't want to see or hear their work. When Anita Baker said to me, "I don't really like my voice," I said, what's going on here? I mean, Rapture had not been released yet, but the Songstress album had done very well. She was the #1 pick for Billboard that year for R&B artists, going back to that. Yeah. And so I started to theorize something I called my redundancy theory. And for what you've said, I think this will make sense to you. I'm the one who did it. I'm the one who sang it. So can I be two brains? Or I'm only one brain listening back to myself? I'm sorry, I don't know where those balloons came from.
Yeah.
But
just one brain. Like, even look at Billie Eilish. Like, her brother's her producer. So she sings it, he produces it in their bedroom, so to speak. But it was not her. She had help from the brother, and now they've expanded. So you just need, like, once again, it goes back to the collaborate. You have to collaborate with others, producers, everyone, because that's going to take you further.
Yeah, one brain's not enough.
No.
But, a lot of people are trying to get away with that, if you will. I talked to you offline a little bit about these people who think it's going to be a great thing for them to build their own little recording studio now that it's affordable.
Yes.
And then they're going to, make it ready for YouTube and whoever, SoundCloud or whatever. And they're going to put it out there, and it's going to be great, right? Because they're going to just go viral, and they just take and I can't completely blame them. I think some of the marketing parts of the music industry are pushing that fantasy. I know YouTube pushed it really hard. Like Colby Calais, who did Bubbly, to sing in my toes. Her dad was one of the engineers on the Rumors album from Fleetwood Mac.
Yeah.
And I also read later on that that song got involved with Coca-Cola. And so there was a lot of promotion before that thing went on YouTube.
Yeah.
It wasn't just viral because people liked it.
No. I think for every one artist that is successful self-producing, you have 999 that aren't. I mean, it's really hard. You really need help. And so if you can get a good team, then you all can kind of ascend and rise together. But, yeah.
Did you know that some producers don't even understand music or even the electronics they're using? Did you know that?
Yes. Yes. I mean, that's the whole point about what I like to teach in terms of music business. Like, some producers don't even understand, like, song splits or how the anatomy of a song. You know, and even some producers might not understand intro, chorus, pre-chorus, verse, outro, and the proper way to stack a song either. So they just got equipment. They want to make a song. They get a reference track, but you need some help there. You can't do it all yourself.
Well, what I mean is that there's some very, very successful producers through the years. And I've listened to some of them be interviewed. And what they were talking about is they say, well, we don't understand music. We don't understand the electronics, but we have a great ear for what audiences like.
Well, then they could be a co-producer, but you need someone who's got the good ears that could really make certain parts of the song come out. And, you know, it's okay to have a co-producer. Like, and ears are very valuable. Like, if you have a good ear, that's a rare skill. But you're going to need someone that understands how much reverb to put on, whether or not to add a delay, you know, how to kind of, you know, use filters, just all different things, you know, maybe make the vocals pop out one time and then go back underneath another time. So you can't do it all yourself.
I love that. I don't know how many people I've suggested, you can't do this yourself.
No. Yeah. But they'll learn the hard way if they choose to, because you only reach a certain level.
Well, Mayott's here, and he's also one of the producers that's done a podcast for me. And when I asked him the question about, you know, go ahead and self-produce yourself and all that, and I said, what do you think of that? And he says, just try it. Just go do it, you know. Yeah. Now, my job as a coach is to save him from that.
Right.
But yeah, there are embarrassing moments for people who buy into these fantasies, and then they go out and they try to apply them. It's very embarrassing, and quite often that's when they quit. And you know, I'm a cheerleader. I want them to succeed. I don't want them to quit. Yeah. But it does happen, and I almost quit. And maybe I did. I actually did quit a couple of times. But I mean, there's just things that happen to you that you just didn't expect because what you read in People magazine, it didn't work.
Yeah. Right? Yeah.
Now, so we talked about this a little bit offline. So I think this is really important based on everything you've said, and I alluded to it at the very beginning. And by the way, the few people have joined. You're on Zoom listening. You can't talk. We're using something called FarPlay so that the quality of our broadcast is higher, and Amani and I can crosstalk. But don't worry, when we get into Q&A, if you want to, and David's here to help you, bring FarPlay onto your computer as an app, then you'll be able to ask questions. But we want this to be a high-quality audio experience for everyone. Anyway, so back to what I was going to ask you. So what was it?
You said it's something very important.
Yeah.
We were talking about after we're coming out of the self-production conversation. You said it's very important, and we talked about it.
Oh, offline. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Okay, so some artists are complaining about having to learn all these things you're talking about. They're saying, well, I'm an artist. I'm not a businessman. Now, just let me finish the thought. So, in my mind, I don't know exactly what they're saying, but they're thinking that's not fun. So, Amani, make it fun for us.
I don't know if I can make it fun, but I would just ask the artist, well, if you had the chance to make $10,000 or $50,000, what would you choose? Because if you want to make the $50,000, you need to understand how you can make that, and you need to understand kind of the rules and the way the game works. And you need to protect yourself, because a lot of times artists will get taken advantage of by labels, or not labels, or they just make bad decisions. But the more you know, and the more education you have, the more you can have productive conversations with, other songwriters, labels, and you can make good decisions. And it's not that difficult. I mean, you can understand, like I said before, the different sides of a song, so you can try to, keep as much of your revenue from the different sides of the song as possible. You'll understand what people are saying when they're talking about master recording, to talk about publishing. Even something as basic as making sure you join a PRO so you can get your public performance royalties. Like, that is not, we think it's common because we're in the industry. But many artists are unaware of just how much they can help you, whether it's ASCAP, BMI, CSAC, just things like that. Even, and I work with my students on this, even some basics in terms of touring. And if you're going on a tour, and maybe you're going on the West Coast, so you're going from like Seattle down to San Diego, and how you can stop in between smaller cities and do house concerts that can actually make you more money than if you were the opening act for a show. But that's not common knowledge. So the more knowledge you have, the better decisions you make. And really, when I coach musicians, I just help them make better business decisions. And it could be a good business decision to sign with a label, do a 360 deal, but at least they know what that means. Because a lot of times you'll see an artist, even some of our favorite artists, some of those famous artists, that sign a 360 deal, and then they're like surprised when the label's taking a good portion of their touring revenue, their merch revenue, their publishing, their sponsorship, because they don't understand a 360 deal. And that's a quick 30-minute lesson on what a 360 deal is and how it can benefit you, the pros and the cons. Lady Gaga had a 360 deal that worked out great for her. There are others that maybe they don't work out. So there's just quick lessons that can just help people come to the table with the knowledge. If you have the knowledge, you'll feel comfortable in your decisions, and you'll be able to ask the right questions.
My part of that is I'm also a voice therapist, and so when singers can't tour, let's just taking somebody, for example, who's been willing to talk about it, Adele, and she's got her band and all these other people sitting in their hotel rooms because she could only sing twice a week. How does that work out with the 360 deal?
Well, for Adele,
she makes a lot of money.
Yeah, so she, whether it's a touring, her appearances, sync. I think sync placements are a tremendous value, particularly for up and coming musicians. If you get with the right TV studio and they're syncing your music to their Netflix show or their Amazon show, you can make a very, very good living and never have to get on the charts at all. In terms of Adele, she's kind of a rare example. Like her band, I'm sure they might get songwriting credits for some of her songs, so that's a little tougher. But only if she only sings 2 times a week. I mean, she writes music, so she's still going to get her songwriting, and she does other things where she can get revenue. So, but she's a rare example. So that's a tough one right there because she's already kind of.
The only reason I used her is because she's been so public about it. But actually, behind doors, this happens a lot.
Yeah.
And the way it works is some artists don't do a lot of performing when in their early years. They do a lot of writing, they get together and rehearse, but they maybe only perform once a month. And so the amount of effort that the voice goes through is very low. Okay. Now all of a sudden they go viral. Now everybody wants to hear them every night. So they try. They get out there and they sing every night, and they can't talk anymore.
Yeah.
All right. So part of my skill is, and we did this a lot when I was with Seth Riggs, like you mentioned, Earth, Wind, and Fire. And Anita Baker came to me because she was having touring problems, because there's a lot of loss of money if they can't. What I'm alluding to is that this part where they have the overhead of traveling, but they don't have the every night income. And it seems to me that in a 360 deal, especially if I understand them, that the every night thing is really important. Is that not the case? Or you know more about that than I do.
With a 360 deal, it's the opposite. Like, they don't have to perform every night because they could be selling merch. They could be, in addition to touring, the label gets a piece of everything. So sponsorship. So even if they're in a movie, so it puts less pressure on an artist to sing every night, but they have to do more in volume of other things to earn money. But then the label gets a percentage of that, so they have to just do more in volume, just in terms of singing, sponsorships, all that. So that's kind of how I answer that. And then you also mentioned Anita Baker. I love to tell the story about her, where Chance the Rapper, he was the one who helped her get back her master's, which recently happened, I think, back in 2020, 2021. And so once again, and she's been around since like the 80s.
Yeah, she's still singing very well, by the way.
Yes, she's still singing very well, but, she signed a deal in the 80s where she didn't own her master's. So 30 years later, after the deal expired, she can get her master's, but only she had to collaborate and work with Chance the Rapper, who helped her get her master's. So even the most legendary of artists, we can all still learn. We're all learners. I don't love it because I get sad, but like you take Michael McDonald and his hit song, I Keep Forgetting. Mm-hmm. And then he was on the Questlove podcast talking about how the producers for Regulate, which is one of the most popular hip hop songs of all time, they offered him, you have to fact check me, but I think it was $30,000 for that sample, which he agreed to, but he didn't have any publishing. Where if he had the publishing on that track, he would have made in excess of $10 million because it's still being played all the time. It's a major hit. And so that's the whole point about education and just making sure people understand and know. And some of our even legacy artists can learn also.
Okay, well, before I open this up to Q&A, so explain, you have students.
Yes.
Is it private students? You teach classes, or how does that work? I mean, if people who are listening to this, how can they have the Amani experience? That's something I haven't mentioned yet, but that's one of your trademarks, the Amani experience.
Yes, that's the name of my company. So I have students. I am a professor at Cal State University Fullerton, and I teach music business, and I teach entertainment operations. I've been there for 6.5 years now. So I have college students, but then I also have private students who I coach on a variety of topics in the music business, whether it be record deals, royalties, marketing, A&R, analytics, which is becoming more and more important, publishing, merch, and touring. And so we go through, I have classes they can sign up for and join like a yearly coaching program, and they get 2 calls a month, a group call a month, and we go through that. I also have intensives where if they want to work, 1 or 2 days and get a lot done in that time period, I also have intensive coaching programs too. So that's my students. I'm always looking for more students, particularly musicians or music industry people who just want to learn more so they can make better business decisions.
Well, Caltech is very lucky. No, I mean, seriously. I know things have changed, and sometimes I look at the perspective of 40 years ago when none of this information was available to anybody.
Right. Yeah.
And now it's just so easy to get to because I wanted that information.
Mm-hmm.
And I had no way of getting it.
Yeah.
Actually, when I finally went to L.A., that was kind of my goal, was to go there and figure out what the hell's going on in the real music industry, compared to being out touring in small towns and nightclubs and so forth. And it's quite an eye-opener.
Yeah. I think Cal State Fullerton is lucky. I created this music business class. And if you have any understanding about the red tape that's involved with creating a new class at a state university, it took me 3 years to get this class through the system. And even when it first went through, it wasn't listed in the official catalog, so it was all word of mouth. But for the last 3 semesters, it's been full. Now I have students coming from France to take the class, so they're international students also, because everyone wants to know. And just music business in general is not taught at many places. So the knowledge is kind of scarce, so we have to share with everyone.
Do you teach it in like Zoom groups?
So I teach it both in person and then also via Zoom groups. We could do Zoom intensive, in person intensive. It's a very interactive class. For example, when we're going through A&R, we have a really interesting activity where I give them certain qualifications for a group. For example, if I'm looking for a jazz-sounding group with a female lead singer, they have to find one in like 45 minutes, and then we have to debate about doing that and accepting this group, which is really typical of an A&R session where it can be very contentious. I want to sign this group. I don't want to sign this group. That's an example. We do touring. And a lot of times we take for granted that students understand U.S. geography and especially students who grew up in California, they might not know where Chicago is in the map, or Milwaukee or Dallas. And they have to understand, if we're going to go on a tour, we're going to go from LA to Las Vegas to Denver to Dallas to Atlanta. We're not going to go from LA to Atlanta to Chicago to Denver to Las Vegas. We have to follow the proper geography. We take that for granted, but a lot of students are not really aware of that, and because they don't teach geography like they used to. So these are just some simple basic things so that if you're an artist and say the label that you're on is planning a tour for you, okay, I need to protect my voice. I need to protect my health. So I don't want to be hopping over different time zones when my sleep is getting messed up. I want to go from like San Francisco, then let's go down to LA, then let's hop over to Vegas, then let's go to Phoenix, then maybe we go to Dallas. I want to be able to have some input on the tour that we're planning so that I'm protecting myself, my voice, so I can always be at my best. And these are just a couple examples of what we do. We get into analytics, which is some of the information there. For example, if you're an artist and say you're based in Seattle, but for some strange reason you're getting a lot of plays in Cleveland, well, you want to make sure, and we can see that through Shazam plays and through YouTube streams, well, you need to make sure you plan a stop in Cleveland because you got a lot of fans there. So it's just a whole bunch of information that we help cover and teach, because the more knowledge, the better decisions they can make.
So one more personal question from me. Aretha Franklin.
Yes.
So I was a Grammy member for many years. I'm no longer, but it's changed too much. I'm not as excited about it as I used to be. But anyway, they had a panel, and one of the speakers was it wasn't BMI, but it was a similar company. Mm-hmm. They were newer, but they said that their song Respect, Aretha Franklin Respects, like they're the same thing almost for most people, even though she had a whole lot of other great hits. But anyway, she didn't write that, and I can't remember all of a sudden who did. Sitting on the dock of a bay. No, that's not him. Anyway, the story is that there were no performance rights, so she's never made a penny off of that record. Mm-hmm. Is that correct, as far as you know?
I don't know about that. We have to do some research on that. But I think the songwriter you're referring to is Otis Redding.
Oh, there you go. Thank you.
He was a songwriter on that. And if there was that's just a shame. There's no performance like. I'll have to check that, because that would be a tragedy, because that song is still being played and remade and put into. The thing is that it's put into movies and commercials, and if no one is, I'm sure someone has the publishing, so they're collecting on that. But still, the public performance, I'm gonna have to add that to my homework, do a little research, and get back to you on that one.
Yeah, I surprised me. I thought, but I know, Stevie Wonder he lost a lot of money before he opened up his own record label. So, I mean, I know there's stories go on. All right, so David, help us, people who want to come in and ask questions on FarPlay, please help us out.
Hello.
Meet David Liao. He is an incredible customer and technical assistant person for FarPlay, and if it's okay, David, I would say he's becoming a good friend of mine.
Yes.
And can't say more about how good he is, so I won't say any more. So who wants to ask Mr. Amani first question?
I would like to torture Amani.
Torture him, okay.
How you doing, Amani?
I'm doing well. Good to see you, sir.
Right back at you. Would you explain what your R&B book, how it will be useful for people who do music, like anyone who wants to do music of today? Would you please explain how it would be useful for that?
I think it will be useful because people can learn from the lessons of groups in the past, so they don't repeat the same mistakes that groups in the past made. Because also I believe that history is a great teacher. I also think that they can recognize the trends that I mentioned in terms of like technology, the Telecommunications Act, and try to stay ahead of trends in the future. So I think that's two reasons. Let me think of a third reason how it can help people. It's really just watching how certain groups hit that next level by who they choose to partner with and collaborate with. Like the Whispers is a good example, how Destiny's Child reinvented themselves, Belle Biv DeVoe, and then also just sharing the stories with your artists that you're working with, particularly the stories about resilience and overcoming failure. I think the stories will help inspire the artists, give them more resilience, and also allow them to stick with it, because it's hard. It's a hard road, but there's some great examples in there of groups that I didn't even mention that really stuck with it and created great careers.
Thank you. One other question. What's your website?
So website is AmaniExperience.com. So it's M as in Mary, A as in Nancy, I, experience, the word experience.com. And if you go there and you go to AmaniExperience.com/quiz, You can take a quiz, which will let you know what R&B group you are based on your answers to the quiz, and that'll get you on my mailing list. And
that's what that meant.
yes. And then if you are interested in coaching, you can go to amaniexperience.com/coaching.
Thank you, bro.
Yes, yes. Thank you. Who's next?
Hey, Bill, you want to chime in? I'd love to hear your voice.
Love to hear my voice. I have no questions. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
But I am going to check out your website.
Awesome. Thank you.
I see Natasha can't ask me.
But you want to put a question in the chat, Natasha?
Yeah.
You could type. Yeah.
Type it in the Zoom chat.
While they're doing that thing about I asked that about R&B, and the thing about history is, like, I get with artists, and when we have troubles, all the time I look for stuff to show them, number one, that whatever they're going through, people have gone through it, and you can see a way out. You can find similarities, and it helps reduce frustration.
Yeah.
It empowers people. I'm actually looking forward to getting your book.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. I mean,
it's
there's
a weapon. It's a tool.
That's good. Thank you for sharing that. There's stories. I mean, you go through each decade. Frankie Lyman and the Teenagers, they were into some trouble. Of course, I mentioned the Whispers were some of my favorite. The Gap Band. Really, Charlie Wilson's journey. That's a great story right there. Through the Gap Band. Even Belle Biv DeVoe. Even Destiny's Child. Like, maybe people don't realize that they were called Flight Time at first, and they lost on Star Search to this group. I think it's called the Skeleton Crew. And they came back and reinvented themselves and took over.
Star Search. Do you know Sam Smith? I mean, did you watch Sam Harris?
I did not. No.
Oh, he was incredible. He did a version of Hat of the Bells, Over the Rainbow.
Okay.
Pretty close to her key.
All right.
It was something while I was teaching him at the time. And yeah. Bill was playing for him. Bill.
I'm the one that stole the arrangement.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, that makes sense. But, that was incredible, Bill. I didn't know you were that intimately involved in that. But it was amazing. I tried to help him with microphones. That's why you sent him to me. But he did not really want to do that.
But.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's stories everywhere, though. Great stories to be shared, even more.
I literally just learned yesterday some of the stuff, like with people putting their names on people's stuff. I forget I think it was Chuck Berry, but the label, in order to pay rent, put whoever the building they were renting, the studio, the landlord, they put the landlord's name on one of the songs to pay rent.
Yeah, and then they're probably still getting paid. They're probably still getting paid. The publishing.
Oh yeah.
I think, in my opinion, the subject and just how publishing works, many musicians don't understand that, and that's something that needs to be taught because it's so valuable. And I just think that people kind of ignore publishing when it's long money.
It is a confusing thing to most of us.
Yeah.
And as somebody told me once, you have a bunch of checks you can get. And you'll be sitting there looking at one, and there's several. Like when we talk about the master is a check. There's all these checks that you can get, and you might fight for one and miss the other ones. And
yeah. Knowledge is king. So, Natasha, did you have any questions? Or go ahead, Bill.
As far as streaming, which is new to me, now I have a kids YouTube channel, and we're signed up with TuneCore to do our distribution. And I'm wondering, there's probably at least a dozen distribution companies, and they get it out to, I don't know, I got to look at the thing, 50 different distributors in the U.S. Or houses, to get the Spotify, Apple Music, and a million of them I haven't heard of. And I was wondering, hello?
Go ahead.
Oh.
Yes, somebody's fan or something turned off, and now everything's cleared.
Okay, and it wasn't mine that time. Okay.
It's my odds. We got you.
Based on your experience, would you recommend one over another, and there's TuneCore, there's Rhapsody, there's a bunch of them.
I like TuneCore. I think that's a good choice. And so I think they're pretty popular and they do well. So I'm a fan of TuneCore. TuneCore works pretty well in my opinion.
How would you compare them to CD Baby?
CD Baby, similar. I've used CD Baby also. I think they're both comparable. TuneCore, I mean, I think you can't go wrong with either of them. So TuneCore is fine, but whenever you choose one, just stick with that one is what I will say.
Yeah, I started with TuneCore, and I didn't think the customer service was all that great, so I went with CD Baby.
Okay.
And right now, so far, everything's all right.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I see Natasha's question here in the chat. What business administration would you recommend? Where would you recommend finding a business administrator? And when you're saying a business administrator, you're talking about someone who's going to register your songs with your PRO. And I know that was one thing you asked about. Anything else that you want them to do? Because that's everything.
This is the first time I've heard about having a business administrator.
It's just like, it's probably, what I'm assuming that Natasha means is someone to just handle the administrative work of registering your songs for the PRO, maybe uploading the music to the distributor, just taking care of all the other admin stuff, which I'm still trying to find someone.
Is that a contractor or what?
Yeah, it's probably an independent contractor, someone that can do that. My person sent me a lawyer, but not this. But initially, it's always good for you to do it yourself the first couple times so you understand what's going on.
That helps protect you.
Yeah, because I know like you're more concerned about like creativity and like doing the music and singing, but the admin stuff can weigh you down. So to be determined.
We want to lift you up.
Yeah. What else? Yeah. I get it.
Yeah, there's space for that.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of what we were talking about, is how Amani can help us get that headspace. I know it's driving me crazy. You know, I don't do a lot of social marketing, but I have some opinions that are different that I want to get out there, and so I take my time. But it is frustrating, even just trying to learn. Okay, how do you put something out on Instagram? And then I put something out and I did it wrong, and I didn't know any way to find out that it was wrong before I put it out.
Mm-hmm.
So crazy stuff like that.
I mean, even the stuff like registering your music so can be shown up on Instagram to be used or whatever, which is you can do that through CD Baby and stuff like that too when you release a signal. Also, like don't discount, what's the site? Bandcamp too. Like Bandcamp, get your music on there, direct to consumer. That can help also. There's so much to do. So little time.
Is there a way for an individual to focus that? I'm sure the book will talk about it.
Well, in the book, we don't really talk necessarily about that particular business side of it, but like if you get, hold on, like of course you have Donald Passman's book, which in this new edition, what's the 11th edition, which is really, really good and can walk you through some things, but unfortunately, like you got to do a lot of it yourself at first.
Right, but I was saying, so since there's so many things to do, how does one prioritize? Like, okay, you've maybe heard the metaphor, eating your elephant one bite at a time.
Yeah. So I would say, like, first, once you have a finished song, like, of course, you want to register with the PRO. Do that, like, register with the PRO, and then distribute it, get it up on like Spotify, all the platforms. Then maybe create like a lyric video for it, so you can have it up on YouTube. And then from there, then you choose what do you want to do next. You, of course, put it up on Bandcamp, and then you got to figure out how you want to market it. Like a lot of marketing, you can maybe try to partner with some playlist people to try to get it on a playlist, popular playlist or whatever. That takes some money and time, but build the relationships now. Try to, share it with maybe other podcasters that might want to feature your song. It's about networking. Maybe you partner with a couple different artists and they share your song that's out, then you share theirs. That's actually a good way because you can cross over audiences in terms of spreading the publicity. And then, I mean, that's just like marketing. And then you want to build relationships with sync people. So once you get a good 5 to 10 songs that are done and available, then you start sharing it with like synchronization people who can get it in like TV shows, commercials, movies, video games. and then it's just like a cycle. You just keep doing it. But you have to kind of build your network now so that once you release things, you can have certain levers you can pull so they know. And then you just have to learn what's new. Like, there's always new apps and new things going on.
Maya, would you ask him about the things that you're doing with AI?
Well, yes, but part of the problem with it is the laws are being figured out. The stuff with that is still being figured out.
Maybe he knows some things. I don't know.
So right now, Amani, so whatever AI creates, it's public domain. If AI creates, but what we're doing is we'll write the lyric, and sometimes we'll do the lyric and melody. We'll tell AI what to do as far as lyric and melody. And then the intention is to come back and have original music created for it. But let's say we do all that. Original music created, but the foundation was whatever the AI generated that we liked for music. And say we keep the drums, I shouldn't say keep drums, we keep the drum pattern and maybe the chord progression. And then we create all the rest of the music. With all of this stuff that we've created ourselves, but we're using AI, what problems do you foresee us running into? Even when they figure these laws out with whatever they're talking about, we're trying to do as much as we can self-generated, but also using AI. What problems can you see us running into, if you can see us running into?
It sounds like you are using AI kind of like as a resource and kind of to help you build a framework, and then from there you're adding on different unique elements to build the song out, whether it be melody, changing the chords around, the progression, adding to the drums. And so since it's public domain, I think that once you get to the more specifics of what you're doing, then that gets to be where it's more kind of your rights and then it's your property. That's kind of what how I view it. It's more as a research, and you're not just taking it straight from AI and releasing it. You're adding things and creating a human feel. So I view it as just a resource. The only issues that would come into is if you take that and then you just put it right to release it. Well, as we've seen, there are a lot of like AI. The challenge we're seeing now is that there are a lot of AI musicians, I put in quotes, that are imitating artists and getting tons of streams and things like that. That's a big issue that's trying to be addressed right now. But that's not what you're doing. So I think that's the difference. I hope that helped.
Okay, so I just told this young man, he samples, right? And I just told him, okay, if you want something from the 70s, get on AI, have it create 70s music for you, chop that up. It's public domain, chop it up and add your beats and create your beats and add beats on top of that, get crazy with it. And even it's, you can't get sued by anybody, I told him, because you're using public domain stuff that you had it create, so it'll sound original to us.
Yeah.
And what do you say about that?
I think that's pretty good advice.
There's a weird echo.
I don't know where that came from.
Okay. I think that's pretty good advice, and just as like a really minor or a quick check, maybe once the track is done, just try to Shazam it to see if anything pops up that it will catch it. Not that this is foolproof, but that'll let you know, okay, if we did the track, we made some changes, maybe we shifted the pitch or whatever, added some more drums, and then we Shazam it and nothing is caught. That could be a good start there, but I'm sure laws will continue to change. But that's pretty good advice, though. That'll help get them the feel and the drums and kind of the sound of the 70s.
Have you been using AI at all?
I use AI for researching specific topics, nothing for generating specific music, bass lines, drum patterns, nothing like that yet.
Okay, and just one last thing.
Yeah.
One of my main things is when it comes to artists, if I want them to try a certain melody or whatever, there can be a pushback. Bro, I'm telling you, I get no pushback from the AI. It doesn't argue with me. It doesn't have attitude. If I wanted to try a melody going up, it'll go up. Like it works with me. So I'm happy.
Yeah. Once you get emotions involved, people get a little squirrely.
Yeah. Like
That's
people,
one thing we didn't talk about with bands is, and I was in many of them. I always ran my own bands. Was that okay? Everybody's creative, but now try to get them to make a decision about anything.
Yeah. It's tough. It's tough.
And Marriott is like he put both feet in, and he worked with a lot of different people, and he gets to see a lot of different things going on. And so negotiation. Say, do you teach negotiating?
Yeah.
No, you don't teach. I kind of asked you a question.
Oh, go ahead.
Do you teach negotiation?
Well, based on my sales and marketing background when I was working in sales, and currently I have a little segment of class where we talk about negotiating, making sure you have like your walkaway rate or terms and working towards that. Like, you know, some concepts out of the book, Never Split the Difference with Chris Voss. So we kind of work on that, particularly if you're like negotiating what percentage of the songwriting splits or you want to do. We kind of talk about that a little bit.
You used a phrase, don't split the what?
Never Split the Difference. That's a really good book by Chris Voss. He's like a famous hostage negotiator. Oh, wow. And so he has a book out called Never Split the Difference. Phenomenal book that talks about negotiating that you can actually use in business and in your real life. I need to reread it personally.
So what was he trying to say? Never split the difference.
Like you always want to kind of, basically that concept is like you always want to remain in control of what you want to have the outcome to be. And so a lot of times when you're negotiating with people, they want to split the difference or meet you halfway, but you want to establish where you want to end up in the beginning so that you're never kind of splitting the difference and getting less than what you want. I'm paraphrasing the concept, but that's generally my summary of it.
Well, that's very popular now, is to concede to the other person and then just, what's the term for it? Sacrifice your side of it to make it work.
Yeah, that happens. But, you know,
I don't think
as you get more experience in the music industry and you get more hits behind you, you have more leverage. But initially, when you start off, you might have to make some sacrifices.
Yeah, a great term for that is you're in demand.
Yes, there you go.
If you're not in demand, you have a very tough time negotiating.
Yeah.
And, you know, I imagine you teach this. I mean, like, if you can get so popular at the local club that they're waiting in lines around the whole club to get in to see you, that's a negotiating perspective.
Right.
You know, if you go to a manager or to a label, you say, look at what I've done on my own.
Yeah.
Does that work?
That will be a good start. That'll be a good start. Yes, yes. And then, you know, go for, well, because not only look at you selling out local venues, but they might want to see your social media followers, and they might want to see how many streams you have. I mean, there's a lot more than just selling out a venue nowadays.
Wow. Okay, well, I guess we're just going to have to read your book.
Yes, I appreciate it, yes.
Because it's so nice of you to come on and not charge us $100 an hour to do this.
My pleasure.
Yeah, thank you very much.
My pleasure. Yeah, just check out the website, AmaniExperience.com. If you want to set up a call, you go to AmaniExperience.com/call or take the quiz, see what R&B group you are, and let me know if you have anyone you know that might be interested in some coaching.
Do you have your prices on the webpage, or is that something you negotiate?
That's something we negotiate. We talk about, yeah. But I have the breakdown of what's included with the different levels of coaching, too.
I'll have to take a look at that. I missed that.
Yeah, it's down there towards the bottom.
Okay, I think we could probably let Amani go. Anything else before I say we can let him go?
I just want to shout out to David a thanks.
Yeah.
For talking me through that.
I'm
glad it worked out. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's helped me so much. And, you know, you think the way I present FarPlay that I'm a shareholder. I'm not. I present it because, to me, it's 21st century technology, and if we're not going to if we're going to catch up, if we're going to be competitive, my out would be all over this one. If you're going to want to be competitive with AI, for instance, he's talked about, you know, hey, if AI can sing you, then maybe you need to work on your singing, right? But FarPlay brings us into the 21st century, and I looked at Bill. You've gone through this, but I looked at Logic. I looked at several of those DAWs, and you know, even though I understood the analog side I couldn't figure out how to even just play a simple 2-track recording off of those things. But now with FarPlay, it's simple.
Yeah.
And so for my students, it's simple. And it gives them an introduction into the world of GarageBand, the world of, you know what I'm talking about as well, Amani? When I'm talking about this DAWs, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I use Ableton Live.
Yeah. So it introduces us, gets us used to it. Even here, we've been changing the volume in our own headphones the way we want to hear things. You can't do that on Zoom, that I know of. So it's all just, to me, it's just like this is the new universe. If you want to join us, come on. If you don't, I don't know what's going to happen to you.
Okay.
Now, the reality is we are weak on the business side.
Yeah.
So we need to learn this stuff. Like there's no ifs, ands, or buts, and there's a whole history of people being taken advantage of, a lot of money being made not by the people who actually create the product.
Yes.
And so there needs to be a change. We need to learn, and this is a step in that direction. And thank you, Amani.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. My pleasure. Well, y'all have a good rest of the day. I'm going to head out, but thanks again for having me on the show, Brad. I appreciate it, and look forward to talking to you all soon.
Cool.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Take care.